Hello, everyone. I'm Becca, dietitian by trade, mom 24/7, wife from the start, and when there's a few extra hours in the day, you might find me hitting the trails or on horseback.
And I'm Kara, a therapist to women, a mom to a boy, an entrepreneur, mountain junkie, and a postpartum runner.
And this is Fit for a Queen, a podcast that's devoted to the female athlete wanting to balance the teeter-totter of all the things we desire out of life as women: performance, health, intellect, and taking time for self, even if we only get 1 minute out of the day.
We're so excited to be bringing you the queens in the athletic world who have done just that. Okay, ladies, take a seat at your thrones, grab your crowns, and welcome to Fit for a Queen. Thank you so much. Welcome back to Fit for a Queen. We have Kara Bazzi on from Opal Food and Body Wisdom. Thanks so much for being on today, Kara.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Double Kara's in the house.
Yes.
I'm going to share with you a little bit about Kara. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist who's been focusing her work on the treatment of eating disorders since 2002. She graduated with honors from University of Washington with a degree in psychology and her master's degree in marriage and family therapy from Seattle Pacific University. She and Julie Church founded the Eating Disorder Program at the Seattle Pacific University's Counseling Center, a multidisciplinary program that offered comprehensive care for the undergraduate student population. From 2004 to 2011, Kara was in private practice, offering individual, family, couple, and group outpatient therapy. She's an approved supervisor through the state of Washington and an eating disorder specialist. One of Kara's passions and interests is working with athletes. As a former University of Washington cross-country and track athlete, she continues to compete in sports, both as a passion and also to stay connected with the athletic mindset and lifestyle. She's developed the exercise and sport program at Opal to ensure that clients' relationship to sport and exercise is an integral part of their treatment. Thanks so much for being on, Kara.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we'd like to first start with getting a little bit more information. Can you share your journey of becoming a therapist and specifically working with clients struggling with eating disorder and exercise issues?
Yeah, my path to the mental health field actually really integrates with my recovery process. I went to the University of Washington and was kind of your quintessential performer type person. So I was, running cross country and track at the Division I level, and I was doing a pre-med track on my way to become a doctor. And the summer between my junior and senior year, I went on a mission trip to Jerusalem and worked in a children's rehabilitation center. And the reason I did this was actually mainly motivated as a resume builder for med school. And what I discovered by doing that experience is I came more in contact with actually what I wanted versus sort of my achiever part.
Mm-hmm.
And by being in that hospital, I realized I was so much more interested in the relationship between the mother and the mothers and the kids in this hospital than I really was about what was going on physically with the kids. And it was one of those moments of, wow, like I can really turn towards something I actually want to focus on versus something I'm good at or I can achieve or prestige. So that was really a turning point where I decided to stop. I had like a couple classes left in my pre-med track and really pursue psychology. And that was a really big moment for me to choose kind of my values over performance. And so, I graduated with a psychology degree. And then before I went to grad school for marriage and family therapy, I spent a year in some work with ministry with athletes through a organization called Athletes in Action. So I got to work with athletes in all the different teams. And it was a really neat opportunity to get an insider view of each sport or the sports I got to work with. And also just made me more hungry to develop more skills of how to be helpful with kind of what was going on with the athletes from a mental health perspective. And so I went into my grad program and, interestingly, I had my internship opportunities I wanted to work in the university setting, and I didn't get that internship. And so I was really disappointed because I thought the university setting would be the way that I could work with people that were struggling with eating disorders. And instead, I got an internship at a youth and family agency. So I was working a lot with kids, and my supervisor was very much encouraging me and affirming me in my work with young kids. And so again, the achiever in me might have said, well, this is something I'm good at. But I knew that my desire was to work with people with eating disorders, given my own personal experience with dealing with an eating disorder in college. And so, so when it came the time when I graduated, I took a major risk and opened my private practice and really did focus on treating eating disorders, marketing myself that way, and then working almost primarily with athletes, given kind of my own journey.
What a great journey of just kind of listening to that gut instinct and leading with your heart, and it seems like it's paid off for you.
Yeah, I mean, I never look back. I think, that was in 2004 when I opened my practice, and I mean, I absolutely love working with this population, and I think the meaningfulness of working with folks who are struggling with something that I personally have walked that path, and so it never gets old, it never gets boring. I think it's just fascinating and interesting work, and I just really just love the clients that come through our doors. So
well, perfect. So you've had quite a bit of different experience. Can you tell us some of the messages that you see our current day athletes receiving in their sport world and culture, and then maybe some of the ones that you maybe fell victim to or heard amongst your teammates?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of messages that athletes can receive, I think, about their bodies, about food, perfectionism, emotion. So just to kind of lay some of those out, I think when it comes to the body, I can start with my experience being in a weight demand sport such as distance running. There are, I think there's a variety of different team cultures. So I don't think all teams are the same, but there is more messages around weight and performance. And I think we're still battling with some beliefs around thinner is better, or there's a particular race weight that is going to be ideal for performance. And those messages can be explicit from teammates or coaches. They also can be, I love talking about the power of silence as well, of when those messages aren't explicit and yet an athlete can connect the dots based on observation.
Yeah.
So like they might be seeing, the thinner athletes racing well, and if coach or if that's not being explicitly addressed on the team, an athlete like myself, I would say that was my experience, is there wasn't explicit messages, but I was observing what other athletes were doing and kind of following suit. So kind of watching my other teammates be pretty restrictive in their eating and just sort of falling in line with what other people were doing, and then seeing performance result and connecting a lot of dots pretty simplistically, because I didn't have education or ways to make it more complicated, and I wasn't working with any actually real valid scientific information for me that really did a lot of damage in my own athletic career in the university.
If they run better than you do, then I might as well eat what they eat. And those messages are really strong, but really unsaid.
I think that's really I like that
important point.
And it can be so normative, I share, when I talk about my story, I never even said I had an eating disorder or acknowledged that as a thing until after I graduated, because I convinced myself that it was normal because it was normative on my sport. And there wasn't anybody challenging what I was doing or what other teammates were doing. And so I just thought this was something that a competitive athlete does. Yeah. And it took a long time to actually see how unhealthy and how really sick I was. So I think that that's something that might be a little bit more difficult in the sport world, is just how things can be hidden behind sort of normative behaviors within a team culture. I also think, messages about food can be, again, explicit or not explicit, but again, the idea that there's a way to eat, particularly for peak performance. I think there's messages potentially around that we have to be careful around perfectionism, especially for athletes that are over controlled in their temperament, that are already leaning towards a more perfectionistic mindset. And so, are they in a sport environment that perpetuates that sort of pressure, and it's almost too much of a good thing? There's a lot about, we talk at Opal about perfectionism versus excellence. So this idea that, yeah, we can give a shit. We can really desire to perform well and try hard. But when it comes down to it, what are we going to do with the outcome? And in a more perfectionistic mindset, there's so much more focus on the outcome than the process. And are we is the sport world that we're in promoting kind of a more outcome-driven, perfectionistic viewpoint about sport performance, or are we being fostered in an environment that really highlights the process and kind of the effort, and that we have maybe not 0% control, but not 100% control of our outcomes. And then that final one I was saying is emotion. I think that's another area that can become problematic is, what is our sport environments encouraging us or not encouraging us in terms of our emotional expression? Are we having to cut off from parts of ourselves to show up in sport in a way that can be problematic later, especially for an over-controlled athlete around like a more emotionally inhibited presentation? And that can lead to a lot of loneliness and just, again, misery, which doesn't help sport performance in the end. So those are the ones that I first come to mind.
Those are really good points.
Yeah,
for sure.
Excellent.
Another topic that the sport world doesn't talk very much about is transitioning out of sport. So can you share a little with us your transition out of sport in college and how you have over time developed a healthy relationship with running after recovery?
Yeah. So, I think I would identify, again, in hindsight, that by the end of college, I had a very compulsive relationship with running. It's pretty miserable. And, I think for me, it helped to have graduated, because I think there was a lot of pressure being a scholarship athlete. It was just, I think it's just hard to alter relationship with sport when you're in that kind of pressure situation. But once that pressure was off, I think there was something in me. I knew I loved sport. I was a basketball player in high school. I really focused on running in college, and I've always loved sports and loved participating in it. And so I think there was enough of knowing that I wasn't satisfied with kind of running has just become miserable and I don't want to do it anymore. And I was also starting my recovery process and being in treatment and therapy and working more on myself. And so I think because I was working more on myself and working more, having a stronger identity outside of sport, a stronger self-worth, I was more willing to kind of really experiment with my relationship with running. And which was exciting because I could be more curious. And so a big question I asked myself was I only fast in college because I was anorexic? And so a major question was this one around weight and performance. So experimenting there was, what could I actually do performance wise by being nourished and by weighing 15 pounds more than I was at my lowest point. And that was a big I was okay with the answer of maybe I was only fast because I was anorexic. So I really pursued that and got data points. And I was training again and racing again. and actually saw data points that suggest that I actually could run as, like in some ways, run as strong with being nourished and having my body be bigger. And I think that just brought more questions of, gosh, how many people are in my boat that they are making themselves miserable to be a lower weight, and they could have more freedom with food and be more nourished and actually race well. Like
Absolutely,
that we don't have to give that part up potentially. And so, that was really exciting work that I did. I also feel like another big thing was what's running outside of competition for me. I'm a very competitive person. I love competition, but what else? And so that was fun experimentation. Like, what would it mean to engage like spirituality through the sport, connection to other people? Like, I remember running with friends who I really love, and yet they were slower than me. And some of the discomfort at first of like, oh, I'm going to slow down and run their pace. Like, this is kind of hard. But then coming to like, be like, who cares? I love it. This is another form of it for me, is connecting to people or connecting to my faith, or really pushing my booty and having good, like really working towards a race and training. And so I think I really expanded my relationship to running. And again, I've fallen in love with it again, at that time. And just, there's so much freedom. There's so much more expansiveness. I'm not devastated by performance anymore. And so it's exciting. And I think that's part of the message that I hope I want to offer for athletes as well, and athletes that have gone down the path of really getting disordered, is that this is possible. It doesn't mean you have to leave your sport forever. You're never going to get the joy back. I think it is possible.
And I like how you experimented on yourself with getting some data points. I know there's only been like really one good case study where a professional runner over in Europe, of course, she had a whole team around her, where they were able to keep her in energy balance for so many years, and she's hardly had any injuries and fractures and kept her period. Now, this is one person, but the more that we have these stories, I think these athletes will believe like, oh, I don't have to toe the line of being so unhealthy and putting myself at risk. I can have both.
Yeah,
exactly. I know. I'm with you. I want more stories out there, and stories of athletes who, are role models too, from a performance side, because I think people, they have a lot of power. I think of Allie Kiefer too, who got a lot of press around her journey.
And I love the stance that you take in terms of, okay, I'm going to be curious about what my body can do at this point. Just kind of sharing that with clients, of looking at it from, let's just be curious with this.
Totally.
With this experience.
Totally. Well, and, we all know that if someone tells us something, like, it could be another way, this is possible, it's not as compelling as actually having a felt experience with something. You might say, okay, great, but to actually have it in your own body and your own experience of something, that's the goal, right? Like, that actually is what creates change.
Yeah. So can you tell us more about how you came about with the name Opal and this Opal food and body wisdom, and how you're integrating movement and exercise into treatment?
Yeah, so Opal is, we're based in Seattle. We're higher level of care eating disorder treatment center. We opened, gosh, it's going to be almost 7 years ago.
Wow.
And
Congratulations.
I know, thank you. I know, it's exciting. The name's funny. Like, it was very challenging to come up with a name, because we cared so much. It was like our baby, to open this place. And it actually came from a baby name list. But we actually, it's not an acronym. It's more of truly the gem Opal. And we liked all the metaphor, about how, it's kind of an ugly, craggy rock with something beautiful inside. The metaphor of, like, you have to have light to refract all the colors. So there's just a lot of play on the metaphor, that felt congruent with what, with treatment. And, the exercise and sport part of it was truly my vision around, starting with my own experimentation I did way back when. and that was something I built off in my private practice, working with clients, was really doing exercise and sport with clients, experientially. And so we built off that when we opened Opal, and have just really integrated that type of programming within the treatment to address and support people in their process around or the relationship to movement and sport. And I can't say enough about how helpful it is to bring that into eating disorder treatment. I think historically people haven't. They've been afraid. They've said no exercise in treatment. But that never made logical sense to me, because how are they going to create change if there's no support?
Right.
It
go
just
home and do it.
Yeah.
I know, exactly. They're gonna exercise anyway. So I just, meeting clients where they're at, I think that, I really wanted to be a place that athletes could feel at home, and that their identity as an athlete was honored and they could see it. I also think, one piece that I feel proud about is knowing the sport world. If we're saying just stop participating in sport, we're creating more of a chasm between the treatment world and the sport world, where we're not building a bridge of trust. And I think that's really important, especially coming from the college athletic scene. An athletic department, they're not going to want to refer their athletes to treatment if we're just saying this thing is, problematic, stop doing it. So, it's really important for me to build trust build bridges and trust with coaches and the sport world. That's probably one of the areas I feel most excited about in my current work, because, we want to be supportive and helping both athletes and, just that whole side of the world around, the sport communities.
I think you're exactly right. I think you have to have both arms of that if you're going to work with athletes. You have to understand the eating disorder, but you also have to understand the sport world. And for a college athlete, they're not professional, but that scholarship money feels like their job. So you're going to scare them if you tell them, like, oh, we're going to pull you out of sport, which we want them to get healthy, but we've got to find that way that they can feel protected and still maintain their spot within their team.
Exactly.
And it's such a good point. If we're scared of touching it, the coach is going to be scared of touching it. And then
we're not scared and be like, here, go at
it. Such a good point.
And we've seen, it's been incredible what we've seen people, the changes they've gone through on that kind of compulsive part of their relationship. Within even higher level of care. So even in a PHP IOP stint, I've seen incredible change. And in literature, they often say the relationship to like body image is one of the last to change, and even relationship to exercise. And I don't have research to back this up, but I would not be surprised if the exercise part is in there because eating disorder treatment centers haven't addressed it very well.
Right. Exactly.
Because I with my own eyes, qualitatively, I'm just seeing some remarkable change for people that have been very obsessive and perfectionistic and rigid, become more flexible. It's really cool.
I bet that's so good to see with your work you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, that's such great information about Opal and then your journey too. Thank you so much for sharing about your journey. And at the end of each interview, we ask the interviewees how they live out the FIT philosophy. So how are you trying to balance performance, health, intellect, and taking time for self in all of your busy
I love
work?
it, right? Always trying to hit that balance. It's funny. I just think I was thinking about what kind of is relevant right now. There's so many things. I've always, I think time is one that's always been tough for me. I'm involved in lots of things that I care a lot about that are very value driven. And, the balance is not always there. So the way I try to look at it is a little bit more perspective. As long as I'm looking at it from kind of forest versus trees, like there's going to be some things that take a back burner in different seasons in my life. But if I can take kind of the overall picture of, am I attending to these parts of myself, kind of in the big picture, I think that's what matters to me. And one concept I'm working with is just through my recovery, I built a really trusting relationship with myself, with food, with movement, with exercise, and a place that I have more struggle with trusting is with time. And I'm trying to really live with a more abundant mentality versus like, scarcity mentality of, so I think that's where I'm working on the balance thing. And I want to approach it. That's the language I use, is like with more of an abundance, like it will all happen. It will all get done. I will be able, it might not be exactly everything that I want it to be, and that's okay. There's a lot of letting go. I think there's still, I always, I lean towards a more perfectionistic mindset. And so I still have tendrils of that I'm working on. So that's what I thought of with that question.
Being the optimist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, it's so fun having double Karas here. Lots of wisdom in this room
Double
today.
wisdom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Kara, thanks so much for being on and again sharing your journey and a little bit about Opal. So thank you for being on and have a great day.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kara.
Bye, Queens.
Bye,
Okay.
Queens.
Thank you to our sponsor today, Sentimano Counseling. Sentimano Counseling is the premier perinatal mental health practice in Kansas City, treating mood disorders during pregnancy and postpartum, perinatal loss, infertility, eating, and exercise disorders. Go to sentimano.com for further information about the practice and services. For additional information on today's topic and guests, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Fit for a Queen.
And Hashtag Fit for a Queen.
And don't forget to rate us on iTunes. We can't wait for you to join us next time on Fit for a Queen.
Bye, Queens.